Hi, Richard.
Unmute video. How's that?
Perfect. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thanks. How are you?
I'm really well. Thank you.
You have a picture of you by an orange tree, but
yeah.
your lips are not moving.
Yes, how I'm doing. I'm actually not feeling great. So
I'm sorry to hear that.
That's okay. And thank you, but I will actually leave my video off. I'm really inflamed. My face is like twice the size it's supposed to be.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. But you look great. So
I'm not sure about that, but good try.
All right. So do you want to pull up your presentation?
Yeah, remind me again how I share screen. There we go.
Yeah.
And that's it. And I want to do the slideshow.
Bottom right. Oh, that works too.
There we go.
Cool.
Okay. Good. And how do I get out of screen share?
It should be at the bottom again. If you hover over, do you have a Mac or a PC?
A PC.
Oh, might be different.
Oh, there it says stop share. Well, that seems easy. Okay.
Perfect.
So we're good. Do we have any sense as to how many people are going to be on?
Let me look at how many registered. Yesterday we were in the 30s yesterday. Yeah, so we have 31 folks registered.
Is that good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know if it's a caveat, but one thing that might hinder folks joining is that Friday was Cesar Chavez Day.
Mm-hmm.
So people might be taking a 4-day weekend.
Okay.
But we'll see.
Okay. So we start at 4, and I guess what I have is this PowerPoint presentation that'll go for basically about a half an hour, and then I presume turn it over to you to field questions. Is that appropriate?
Yeah, so like I'll start with a short introduction of myself, and then I'll have you introduce yourself. And then you can start your presentation. I'll probably say ask folks to like keep their questions till the end or put them in the chat as we go.
Okay.
We will open it up and people can either unmute themselves and ask the question themselves if it's a long one, or they can put it in the chat. And then we did have some questions that came in via the registration link.
Okay.
And one via email. So I'll ask those as backup as well.
Okay.
And yeah, should go well. It's pretty informal thereafter.
That sounds fine. Will I be able to see all the audience members, or are they going to be muted and non-videoed?
They will definitely be muted for your presentation.
Okay.
Unless we get a Zoom bomber, which seems to happen occasionally.
Okay.
Knock on wood that they don't. But yeah, so they'll be muted during that part. But sometimes they have their videos on, sometimes they don't. It's kind of hit or miss. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think it appears as though we're fine. If you don't mind, I think I'm going to go make myself a cup of tea and get back here within 10 minutes.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. I have some stuff to do over here.
Okay.
So yeah, we can reconvene in about like maybe 10 minutes exactly. So that'll be at 58.
Well, I guess I'm inclined not to get off. I'll just keep this open and just return with my cup of tea hidden somewhere. So
you don't have to hide it. Yeah, that sounds good. I'll mute myself too, and we can just pop back here.
Okay, sounds good. I'll talk to you in a couple minutes.
Okay. How's the tea?
Tasty.
Good. All right. I'm gonna let Shayla in. We've got one person in the waiting room. And we'll usually like give people a few minutes to join
Of
in.
course.
And since it's recording, people can always watch this later.
Okay.
So in case we get fewer people than expected. Hi, Shayla or Sheila. We're just
Hi,
folks join in. How are you?
good.
Awesome. Feel free and grab a cup of water before we start. Cup of tea, cup of Joe. Yes. Hi, Lori. Hi, Camilo. We are letting folks join in. We'll get started here in a minute or two. All right. I wish we could play music, but I feel like there's a copyright issue there. So,
You could sing.
oh, we don't want that. That will definitely turn people away. Unless that's what we want. Maybe Lori. Lori, do you want to sing? Oh, you're muted.
How about some happy birthday or something like that? I know all the words to that one. No, I think there's a family tradition of not being able to carry a tune in a bucket. So I proudly am continuing that. So you do not want to hear me sing.
Yeah, I was not gifted with that ability.
Well, fortunately for you, I was only asked to talk, not sing, because it would be painful.
Gotta be like one person here that can sing.
Who's got the voice? Who's got the voice?
Next time I'll bring a singer in.
Erin, you were saying you can't play music because you're recording it and there's a copyright thing?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
I just like to be on the safe side.
Yeah, totally.
Hi, Christina. We're just letting folks join in after maybe coming off of other meetings and such. But let's go ahead and get started here because I'm excited about this and this is gonna be a fun one. If y'all are ready. Alrighty. Hi, everyone. My name is Erin Meyer. I'm the Sustainable Food Programs Coordinator here at the University of California, Merced. And today we're here to talk to Richard Munson from a whole bunch of things, but his awesome book, I have it here somewhere, not that you can see me, but Tech to Table. I wish you could virtually sign it somehow for me. I don't know how we'll make that happen. Technology's got to have a way to make that happen. But that's what we're here to talk about, technology and food and some other things. So the structure for this today will be after I introduce myself, I'll have Richard introduce himself, and then he will give a presentation about the book and other things, I assume. And then we'll open up the floor to your questions, because this isn't Ask Me Anything, so you all get to ask whatever you want. Though keep it appropriate and professional if you could. And then yeah, we'll go from there. So I'm going to give it over to you, Richard, if you want to introduce yourself.
Well, sure. Thank you very much for the kind introductions. Nice to be with UC Merced. That's obviously done a lot of great stuff on net zero, climate, and farm issues. So thank you for that. You had mentioned that I've done a lot of things. It could be viewed as it's rather disparate or disorganized or what have you, but it's included, teaching, working on Capitol Hill, helping form a clean energy startup. My most recent day job was I was Midwest director for the Environmental Defense Fund, working mostly on clean energy issues. And as you noted, I've written a couple of books. And before the one that we're going to talk about today, I did a biography of Nikola Tesla, the great inventor of electric motors, radio, remote control. The list goes on. So I think the underlying theme throughout, if there is throughout such a disparate career, is the fascination with innovators and entrepreneurs. And I guess a couple of years ago, I decided that I would like to focus on the agricultural sector from that perspective, in large part because, ag is this world's largest economic sector. Some value it at like $15 trillion. It's also, it and food also are sort of at the core of so many of our key challenges, including climate change, immigration, health, social equity. I mean, the list goes on. But I became particularly fascinated with farm and food issues because I learned that agriculture is the nation's least digitalized, what some would say least modernized economic sector, which means, at least from my perspective, is that it opens up a slew of possible problems, as well as offers enormous opportunities for change. So ag also is a laggard when it comes to research and development. Healthcare industry spends 21%. Automobile is like 16% of their budgets on R&D. The global food companies, however, spend less than 1%. What that tells me is that there's a whole lot more focus on protecting current practices rather than on creating novel ones. So I went in search of people that were thinking about food and farm innovation. And if you give me a moment, I'm going to try and share a screen. And my thought was that I would, for about a half an hour, introduce you to a few of the people that I met, and at least some of the themes that I came across with, and hope that it sparks a bunch of questions and comments from you. So if this works, let's see. There we go. Does that work? Can everybody see that?
Yes, perfect.
So before even beginning, let me just suggest that food, I recognize that food is a very dangerous topic to discuss. What we eat is part of our culture, part of our identity. We hold almost religious passions about our diets, and we argue heatedly about our food choices and other people's food choices. So please be aware, I'm not even going to pretend to resolve those debates or to make recommendations about the foods you eat or should eat. Agriculture itself is also a difficult topic to discuss because it elicits two pretty diametrically opposed views. On the positive side, we have this image of a well-stocked supermarket at which at any time of the year you can find basically a cornucopia of in and out of season fruits and vegetables, assortments of grains, dairy products, meats, you name it. The supermarket in many ways is perhaps the model of a supply chain that works well. Even if it was challenged by COVID, it still is quite remarkable to go into a modern supermarket here, or to be honest, in most other countries. Another upbeat sign about agriculture that people point to is that food's share of an average American budget fell by half since the 1950s to only now about 10%. What that means is that more people can afford meals. And then finally, there's this positive view that the observation that most farmers are effective, even passionate stewards of their land. That said, there is a second set of images that in which you would suggest that agriculture is in trouble and is causing trouble. The industrialized farming, at least according to some estimates, is the single biggest cause of climate change. The livestock sector alone, particularly the burps of cattle, release more methane-laden emissions than all the greenhouse gases that come from cars, trains, boats, and airplanes combined. Plowing, I mean, the list goes on of concerns from an environmental perspective. Plowing exposes farmlands to rain and wind erosion, leading to the loss of 30 soccer fields of soil every single minute. The clear cutting of forests, particularly in Amazonia, to make room for more farms to grow more corn and soybeans to feed more cattle, that releases greenhouse gases and destroys biodiversity. Irrigating crops sucks up almost 80% of the planet's fresh water, depleting aquifers and acidifying soils. You spray synthetic fertilizers and pesticides, often eliminating beneficial microbes and shrinking the land's fertility. And meanwhile, the runoff of those chemicals causes 70% of water pollution, poisons private wells, and forms what are called dead zones in oceans and lakes, this being Lake Erie, where no aquatic life can survive the oxygen depleted, green scum areas. Then there's the whole issue of animal welfare, which I'm not going to get into because there's obviously the massive scale of slaughter, but you also have chickens, cattle, and pigs that often spend their lives in cramped cages or jammed feedlots. Other huge challenges when it comes to food, of course, relate to equity and nutrition. While some farmers, large farmers and ranchers are thriving, many small landowners tend to struggle, and many worry about attracting a new generation of farmers. And then there's the shock that 14% of Americans lack sufficient food, often lining up at food pantries like this one, and obesity rates, at least in this country, approach 40%. So these two competing images, what do you do with them? I mean, they unfortunately are prompting very different visions for the future of agriculture and food, perceiving in a simplistic way as sort of a battle between big ag and return to husbandry advocates. One camp is advocating chemicals, irrigation, industrial-sized operations, concentrated feedlots, while the other, calls for organic and regenerative cultivation, winter cover crops, and free-range animals. I think, however, that neither camp has proven capable of providing the sufficient supplies of nutritious food without environmental damage. As I just mentioned, malnutrition and pollution flourish under big ag, and despite decades of appeals, organic farming accounts for still less than 1% of US croplands, and broad adoption of regenerative practices has really failed for the most part to materialize. So in the course of my research for the book Tech to Table, I met largely unrecognized innovators who may represent a third path, an alternative that advances disruptive technologies that can feed a growing population nutritiously and sustainably. So they offer a fresh approach, or at least I'm suggesting, and welcome your comments and reactions, a fresh approach to increasing options for both farmers and consumers. Yet, so going on with this contrasting themes, when we start to focus on food and farm innovation, we highlight two other contrasting images. They're the vast farm fields of California's Central Valley, which you obviously know, versus the sleek glass and steel office parks of Silicon Valley. And it would seem, to be honest, that can be hardly two more different pictures of the American economy, in large part, as I noted at the very beginning, that farming is the least digitalized economic sector. But in just the last few years, these worlds, I think, have been colliding, disrupting an industry well known for its conventionalism. Innovators have begun to redefine what it means to farm and even the nature of food. Ag tech startups have been soaring about 80% annually over the last decade. In 2021, they attracted more than $52 billion worth of private investment. Granted, that growth fell last year, but as did capital investments throughout the economy. But before meeting a few of these entrepreneurs that I met, allow me to pose two what I think are obvious questions about this emerging innovation. The first is, why now? We've known for some time about the health, equity, and environmental problems associated with conventional agriculture. So why are so many food and farm entrepreneurs suddenly attracting investments and capturing markets? The short answer, I think, is that we live in a rather unique era of rapid and, to be honest, rather stunning technological advances, particularly a confluence associated with sensors and data collection. We have so much more data from various places that we can pick up through our more modernized sensors. We now have leading edge computation that can interpret and act on that data. And the advanced engineering advances, particularly with robots, are really quite stunning. Eric Schmidt, who used to be the CEO of Google, called this combination a super evolution that he said will fundamentally, irrevocably transform wide-ranging industries. And he claimed that these innovations particularly allow startups to advance faster than incumbents, resulting in what he thinks will be agile, powerful companies. Within just the past few years, this super evolution, this confluence of technologies, finally began to reach the agricultural sector, spurred by, I guess, agile entrepreneurs and creative investors who see an opportunity to profit through innovation and think that they can outcompete what they perceive as big ag, slow-moving oligopolies. So a second, if you will, fundamental question is, should we trust these innovators and these various new technologies? My answer is not blindly. We had, during the Green Revolution of 1950s and 1960s, technologists did increase crop yield substantially and reduced worldwide hunger. But many argue that they also contaminated lands and water, decreased food diversity, limited competition. So even think about things like DDT and even margarine. These were promising innovations that proved over time to be, hazardous in a variety of ways. I suggest that by using today's advanced sensors and data analysis, we're going to have to judge these entrepreneurs very strictly by whether they are providing long-term sustainability. Do they protect the planet? And whether they provide equity. Do they provide nutritious food to a growing population? My book profiles 25 food and farm innovators. I'm going to discuss, for your sake, only just a few today. I found it particularly interesting that almost all the people that I focused on or met had not previously been involved with agriculture. They're bringing fresh perspectives to this critical and massive industry. Also striking, at least from my repertorial attempt, they seem to be advancing a variety of approaches. There's not one silver bullet out there, if you will. They suggest that there are diverse opportunities for improvement. I could have chosen a lot of different entrepreneurs and startups, but I hope that the 25 provide some sense of the growing dynamism within agricultural and food. But I want to warn that I'm going to be the first to admit that some of these profile inventors are going to fail. They're going to flounder. They're going to be, bought out. And some of the original entrepreneurs are going to be replaced by more business-focused managers. Startups indeed are very hard. But the key development I think that I learned is that investors are placing billion-dollar bets of their own money on food and farm disruptors. So let's meet a few of them. We're going to start with Uma Valeti, who came to the United States from India as a cardiology resident at the Mayo Clinic, where he used stem cells to repair muscle tissues that had been damaged by heart attacks. He had long been growing up in India, seeing, the slaughtering of animals, had been concerned about animal cruelty and contamination in slaughterhouses. But he slowly realized that his background, that he could use stem cells to grow essentially muscle tissue or meat. And he had this great quote where he said that if I continued as a cardiologist, I might save a few thousand lives over the next 30 years. But if I'm successful in helping to change the way meat is made, I can positively impact billions of human lives and trillions of animal lives. So in 2015, he founded Memphis Meats, recently named it Upside Foods. And rather than focus on plant-based alternatives, which have gotten a whole lot of attention, Valeti extracts cells rather painlessly from an animal and inserts them into a growth potion of nutrients, salts, and acidic buffers. These cells multiply in bioreactors that look and act a lot like fermentation plants within a beer brewery. Valeti admits that a lot of consumers are going to think it's weird to eat cell-cultured burgers or chicken nuggets or pizzas or what have you. Yet he argues that it's even weirder to eat slaughtered animals and fecal contaminated meats, and he predicts that eaters will embrace these sort of new offerings once they experience their meaty tastes and understand their environmental and health benefits. He recognizes, and it's really true of a lot of the startups, that his costs have to fall if he's going to be successful, and his production capacity has to rise. And in the last decade, costs have indeed dropped quite dramatically. Israel-based Future Meat Technologies claims that its cultured beef will cost by the end of this year as little as $10 a pound. That's still about 20% or so higher than grass-fed meat, but is an amazing decline from the $1.2 million per pound for the first cell-based patty that was introduced just 8 years ago. So two other innovators, these are Diane Wu and Purnima Paraswaran. They met in graduate school at Stanford and formed Trace Genomics in 2015 to offer DNA kits for soils. These are sort of not unlike the genetic tests such as 23andMe that provide insights into your human ancestry, your health, your traits, what have you. So they, instead of analyzing your ancestors, they analyze a few grams of soil from different parts of a field. They digitalize that vast amount of data about bacteria, viruses, and fungi and other things. They compare those results through proprietary algorithms with thousands of other soil samples. And then they offer practical, actionable intelligence to farmers about what to plant where, what nutrients to feed the soils, and how to avoid diseases that lurk in the dirt. Their argument is that that such decisions in the past during growing seasons has been an art form, and that they're trying to make it now a science. Another set, these are James Rogers, Jenny Du, and Lou Perez. Their goal is to cut food waste in half. They have PhDs in material science and chemistry from UC Santa Barbara, and they're devising plant-based coatings that double the life of avocados, oranges, and other produce. One of the key problems with agriculture is that we waste about 40% of our food, a staggering number. But the food loss portion of that loss, at least according to these innovators, is rather straightforward. They say the two leading causes of produce spoilage are water loss and oxidation. That's water evaporating out of the fruits and vegetables or oxygen getting in. So these three entrepreneurs have created tasteless, odorless, invisible, and edible coatings that consist basically of fatty acids and other organic compounds extracted from the peels and pulp of produce, that they then act as a physical barrier to keep water in and oxygen out. Appeals investors include Oprah Winfrey and a variety of others, and the startup recently closed another $250 million capital raise, giving it a $2 billion valuation, yet making it yet another ag tech unicorn, as billion-dollar companies are called. Let's meet Irving Fain. He's the CEO of a company called Bowery. In my view, he's totally redefining the farm from a vast horizontal expanse of rural land to vertical warehouses in urban and suburban centers that do not rely on soil or sunlight. Designed by the designers of Amazon's massive fulfillment centers, Bowery's warehouses, and their sophisticated sensors and robots, they provide, bok choy and lettuce rather than the Amazon warehouses of books and jewelry. These are hydroponic or aeroponic, lead-nurtured, robot-dominated systems. They provide nutrients to individual plants, not across vast fields. They use no pesticides. They cut water use by about 95%. They produce about 100 times the output of an equivalent size plot of horizontal land. Significantly, their growing season never ends. Therefore, they can provide quick delivery of fresh and organic greens to local restaurants and supermarkets throughout the year. Fain also brags about offering economic development and vigor to inner city communities and asserts that high-tech farming, such as what he's doing, provide good-paying jobs in formerly abandoned spaces within neglected neighborhoods. Couple more, Thomas Palomares and Sebastian Boyer. They grew up as friends in France before attending MIT and Stanford. They're offering autonomous machines that detect weeds and, mimicking a worker wielding a hoe, scoop up the unwanted plants out by their roots without using any poisonous herbicides. The technology within this Zamboni-looking robot is, at least in my opinion, stunning. FarmWise, their company, takes thousands and thousands of pictures of divergent weeds and crops at various stages of development and under different growing conditions. With machine learning, that company creates images of what needs to be removed and what needs to be protected, deploying algorithms probably even more sophisticated than what Facebook and Google use to recognize us. So after differentiating between sprouts that will become broccoli and other produce, or those that will become pigweed or other invasive weeds, the robot deploys its pluckers to remove unwanted plants from the field and avoid hours of backbreaking labor. And yeah, autonomous robots can operate 24 hours a day. One other, Virginia Emery, she breeds customized bugs. Her favorite being mealworm beetles. What does this have to do with anything? Well, she's figured out how to do that at a substantial volume in order to provide high-value proteins and nutrients for poultry and fish farms. And what that means is that as a result, she avoids the chemicals, erosion, and irrigation associated with growing conventional feed made from corn and soybeans. Her insects, she likes to say, they take up little space, they live happily when they're jammed together, they survive without light, they breed throughout the year, they emit few pollutants or greenhouse gases, they require little feed, the list goes on. She claims that they're the most sustainable response to agricultural challenges. And she argues that the bugs' poop, which is called frass, is marketed as an organic fertilizer. Finally, the bugs, mealworm. Finally, let's meet Lynette Kushma and Emilio Sepulveda. They're co-founders of a company called Natural Machines, who are making real, it's probably, dates me, the replicator that you might remember from Star Trek. It was that fantasy machine that synthesized meals on demand. Their device, called a Foodini, is about the size of a microwave. And its stainless steel containers store natural and fresh ingredients, and its computer stockpiles recipes, or you can download them from your smartphone, and can even link to your Fitbit in order to know if the meal that it's about to print for you, or a candy bar that it will make for you as well, needs a little extra vitamin D or iron since you just came back from a run. Foodini has blue lasers in there that penetrate and heat the meal, and it has infrared light that browns the surfaces of the meal to an eater's particular specifications. There are Michelin-starred chefs that are using Foodini to dazzle customers with flower-shaped appetizers or elaborate cake offerings. Some restaurateurs are displaying the device to attract customers who sort of marvel at the food being printed before their eyes. And some KFC outlets are selling chicken nuggets made by Foodinis. According to Kushma, the Foodini is reinventing our culinary ways. I will admit, my wife, who's a great cook, is not wild about this one, but it does totally redefine what you think about as far as food. So I could go on, but let me conclude that by noting that there is at least I think, a quiet revolution that's disrupting the agricultural sector and creating new eating options. This growth of food and farm innovators that I ran into, I think, has been astonishingly rapid. None of the profiled companies existed even a decade ago. No entrepreneur produced cell-based proteins without slaughtering animals. No firm challenged the horizontal farm and grew plants vertically. None plucked weeds robotically or doubled the shelf life of produce with plant-based coatings. So in this era of food and farm challenges, you could argue that these innovators, I guess I will argue that these innovators offer hope for feeding a growing population nutritiously, equitably, and sustainably. So thanks for your interest. Again, I appreciate the invitation and would welcome your questions and discussion. And I will get out of this sharing of my thought, there's my book one more time. I have to do that since my publisher. Thanks.
That was great. Awesome. All right. So
I'm now having a tea.
yeah, take a break. You did a great job. So if you have questions, feel free, and if you're on video, raise your physical hand. If you're not, you can raise your little digital hand. You can also put any questions you have in the chat, but this time is yours to ask our expert anything. Yeah, Lori.
Oh, thank you, Richard. Thanks, Erin, for bringing Richard on board. I really appreciated your presentation, and I can't wait to read your book, Richard. I have loads and loads of questions,
Sure.
but I'm not going to monopolize things, but I'm just going to ask one at a time because I see Annette has one too. So I'm thinking about technology that you see as being emergent beyond the farm gate or beyond food production, that's around things like aggregation or coordination of production, so that you can have more sort of efficient food supplies and more food security. I'm especially thinking about technologies like blockchain, which is in use a lot in China. And I guess I'm, also, well, yeah, I'm gonna leave it there because I also want to ask about carbon credits and how that might move the needle in terms of, these kinds of food production that, don't do a lot of carbon sequestration. Thank you.
Very, very good question. One of the people that I did profile is trying to bring blockchain into agriculture, seeing the benefits of being able to provide, not only increasing the efficiency of the supply chain, but also providing to consumers information about what the heck has happened to their food throughout the entire process, believing that there is a growing demand from consumers for transparency. So I think the growth of blockchain, and I'm not pointing to the ups and downs of cryptocurrency, but I mean just the ability to be able to track a variety of information sources associated with the food that you're eating has been extraordinary. And I think that can only increase the efficiency of the production, as you noted, and also increase consumers' knowledge of what, in fact, options they have.
Thanks, Richard.
Hi, I'm Annette Olson, and my background is a biologist, and born on a farm, and going to soon acquire a farm.
Oh.
But right now I am lead for a group called Climate Steps, which is focused on helping individuals take impactful action. And there's a lot of disagreement about whether individuals can or not, but they often can if they go directly to industries, to sustainability managers, and talk about their concerns. If they comment on public regulations, science has shown it influences the tone of the regulation and the wording of the regulation. If they work on infrastructure issues within their region. So I would love to take some hints back to our users on what can they do to have a say in kind of where agriculture is heading. And you mentioned, consumers wanting transparency, but are there any practical actions that you think of off the top of your head about how we tie community with the organizations that are implementing these actions?
Good questions. I will probably revert a little bit to my previous job, where, as I mentioned before, I was with the Environmental Defense Fund, who largely through activating citizen activists they were able, for instance, to approach McDonald's at an early stage and suggest that these clamshell containers for their hamburgers and fish burgers were a total waste and destroyer of the environment. You look more recently, they've set up an office in Fayetteville, Arkansas, to work with Walgreens, which is an amazingly huge food company, in addition to everything else that they provide. But to have Walgreens vastly increase the amount of both transparency, but also organic and regenerative, farming support that a large supplier or provider like that can do. So I think there are lots of options for consumers to be engaged. The challenge, as you, I'm sure, know well, is just, getting them organized enough so that their voice is heard, by the right folks. But I think that there are enough examples to show, such as the two that I just mentioned, that when that happens, these big corporations, which make billion-dollar decisions, will have an impact on the market and the future of agriculture and food.
Yeah. Thanks. I did admittedly miss the first 2 minutes when I so, but yes, thank you. Yeah, that's the goal, tying people to the actual actions. So
yeah. It's hard. I mean, it's really hard, as you well know. But
yeah.
It looks like Steve has his hand up. Steve?
Hello. I too apologize for being late to the conversation. Full disclosure, I'm a software engineer. I work for Indigo Agriculture, which is in the carbon credit and the seed enhancement business. Mm-hmm. But so I'm super interested in what you're talking about. But what I specifically wanted to ask about, I'm thinking of a friend of mine who operated a restaurant for a number of years and has written several times analyses of the economics of restauranting, and has come to the conclusion that it at the current price point in a number of places in America, restaurants are becoming increasingly unsustainable. Just as a business, you basically can't make a living making people food. And so...
Well, that's a horrible thought.
It is. Yeah, this is really distressing to me. And so really what I wanted to hear your thoughts about what possibilities do you see in technology to sort of to fundamentally tilt the playing field. I don't want just a machine that makes the same hamburger faster and cheaper.
Sure.
I want to see what can we do to make it possible for these social structures to continue on, like such as a restaurant.
Well, I'd like to circle back at some point and have you, if you wouldn't mind, give a 2-minute on Indigo, simply because they are doing such amazing things relative to data collection associated with, creating, carbon markets and also, as you well know, financing, seed development, et cetera.
I agree. I'd love to, but go ahead.
About restaurants, I was talking with a group of restaurateurs a couple of months ago, and I guess my observation is that there's the potential through these technologies to increase consumer options, which only increase if restaurateurs and chefs take the lead, as they are the creative ones of trying to figure out how to make tasteful, nutritious food. If there are more options of new vegetables, for instance, that come out of vertical farming, if there's a new fancy way of, and I'm not suggesting it's the only one, but of printing food, ravioli or pizzas, in a way that is at least entertaining, then restaurateurs might be able to attract more people to them. So my hope is that, and I see a fair number of chefs that are looking for new options for them, and the optimistic side of me thinks that some of these entrepreneurs can be providing that, and that will attract consumers to try new things at the restaurants that are taking leaps of innovation themselves.
I mean, thank you. Yeah, the first thing that came to my mind thinking about sort of intersection of restaurants and tech was I remember seeing a pitch from a company, I want to say about a year ago, whose pitch was essentially, let's take the warehouse automation that companies like Amazon have developed and re-implement it in your restaurant kitchen. And so I chatted with my buddy about this, and his response was essentially, "This sounds like the most dehumanizing thing I can imagine." And like all the chefs I would work with would quit.
Well, I mean, on the opposite side, I just came back from Mexico, and there was this great restaurant which had a garden out back, and people could go out and see and pick out and point to the food that they wanted to have, concocted into their meal for the evening. And at least the people that I was with and myself, I was thinking, this is great. And very, if nothing else, it was entertaining, but I also think it was significantly more nutritious and more varied than you would get in, the traditional, restaurant approach. So do you, if Aaron's okay, do you mind just giving us 1 minute on what Indigo is doing with the massive amounts of data it's collecting?
Happy to. So, one
Aaron,
of our
lines,
sure. Well, let's see how good a job I do. But one of our lines of business is we enable farmers to generate carbon credits by changing their growing practices. The farmer's job is essentially to adopt practices such as cover cropping, no-till agriculture. There's a wide range of things they can do, different sorts of water use, etc. And we gather data that essentially proves to the third-party carbon credit authentication agency that the farmers really are doing what they need to do to sequester carbon in the soil. And
so if I might just
add,
what you're doing is providing the data so that you verify that they're eligible for credits to make it more economic to do these very activities. So you're making the market work through making data available.
Yeah, and actually, it's last year I believe generated the first ever agriculture-based carbon credits, which was a really big deal for us. But on the one hand, it makes me really happy that we can incentivize farmers to adopt practices that are better for the environment. It's also a little depressing to me that we have to sort of hack the free market in order to do it. Wouldn't it be nice if folks just did this by themselves? But I'm sorry, I'm talking a lot. I'm done.
Well, I mean, I think what you're coming back to is a point that made, and people have different views on the power of markets, but they are powerful. If in fact there are an economic clarity that going a particular path, in this case, a sustainable path, makes more sense, that's quite valuable from an environmental perspective, let alone possibly from a nutrition perspective. So your view on the markets could change, but going to Lori's point, I think, being able to use them, and to use them, you need clear data that justifies that what you're doing is in fact sustainable, then provides an incentive for farmers to do, at least in my view, a better sustainable practices. All right. Sorry.
No, couldn't agree more.
Any other comments, observations? The woman with 20 questions.
Yeah, and then I've got some questions that came in via the email and other means. So Lori, if you want to go first.
Yeah, maybe I'll just say something about, I'm a former organic farmer, and in a lot of cases, really the benefit to us to carbon credits and being able to be transparent with our practices and the impact of our practices is not that we change our practices, it's that we get credit for our practices that we're already doing. And most likely, a smaller scale farmer is already naturally doing the stuff that, you know, bigger farmers or industrial ag has to be convinced to do. But I'm wondering, and I'm happy to cede the platform at any point, especially to people who already have questions, but you can answer this now, Richard, or just put it off. Either way, I'm really interested in your take on open source. I run an open source platform, and, you know, it seems like a real leveler in terms of actually being able to help smaller farmers and community scale food systems actually become players in these bigger markets like carbon markets, and being able to enable agriculture. So like, if you don't have, you know, many rounds of funding to become a unicorn, I think there's still a lot of technologies that are out there, and, you know, they're very, you know, kind of scrappy, but really they can be a game changer for a smaller farmer. And I just kind of wanted to get your take on those, just specifically open source tools like, you know,
do you mind, just for,
PharmOS,
you know, to encourage conversation, do you mind giving a 30 seconds or a minute on what you're doing with open source?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a member of a group called the Gathering for Open Agricultural Technology. It's part of, or intersects a little bit with, a group called Open Team, which is Open Technology Ecosystem for Agricultural Management. And it's really a loose confederation of folks who are building tools for like really every single stage of the process, you know, from crop planning to farm management to agriculture to aggregation, distribution, sales, certification. I run the Open Food Network in the US, which is an open source platform that's available in 20 different countries. It works on a commons. And I think one of the things that we're seeing right now, especially, is that an open source tool, because it's not, it doesn't have to be proprietary about the work that it's doing and the benefit that it has, it's way more likely to start doing things with interoperability and transportability of data, and really, you know, the story with a really low barrier to entry to really like dig into that technology. But you're the expert, you tell me.
Well, I mean, what you're describing is, you know, opening up these technologies and approaches so that more people have access to them. I mean, nothing could be better than that. You will find, of course, those entrepreneurs or investors who are putting up, you know, millions of their own money, who will develop algorithms or other things that are not exactly keen about sharing them. So where is the balance between having some level of openness that does share things that can be shareable versus the incentive that some have to protect their algorithms that they've spent a lot of money on, that also have advantages, you know, from a sustainability perspective. So I'm not sure that I've got the answer to that one, but, you know, in a world, I'm not convinced that you have necessarily, you have to choose between one or the other. But the open source side of things, I think, is showing just the innovation that's out there, and the willingness to share success stories and tools that can make the world a better place.
Okay. Oh, was somebody else?
Oh,
okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Sorry, Aaron. I have a time frame question. In some of these, you mentioned the stages that the companies are at. You know, it takes time to implement, grow, scale some of these, well, most of these, and then also get approval by the FDA in some cases, like for appeal, I'm sure we'll need approval. How likely are some of these to be implemented within, say, the next 10 years, when we are really, the, you know, frame we're really striving for massive change by?
Well, the honest answer is I don't know. And that's kind of the exciting part to me, because where innovation goes and how rapidly it accelerates depends upon so many factors that I just can't predict. I look though at what has happened about the speed of some things. I know plant-based meats are now getting more scrutiny because they didn't have the growth numbers that they have had over the last decade. But I mean, think about plant-based foods, which, probably 6-7 years ago, almost nobody knew anything about. And now 70% of us have tasted them. That's a pretty huge change. Look at what's happened with cell culture foods. They've gone from, what did I say, about $1.2 million per pound down to about 30. So things can change rapidly. Will they change rapidly enough, and who in fact will do it? I think you were headed, and maybe I'm putting words into your mouth as to where you were headed, but I mean, who's going to lead this innovation charge? And that I also don't know. I mean, there are some that will say, all these entrepreneurial companies will get bought up by big ag, and some, depending upon your view of big ag, will either have the resources to accelerate their innovation, or the innovation will get stifled to protect big ag's current products. A lot of the entrepreneurs that I met with, you would think, at least having been involved with a startup, one of the goals of a lot of startups are to have enough success that then you're noticed by somebody who will buy you out, and you'll become rich, and you can go off and have a wonderful life or something. But I think almost all of the entrepreneurs that I talked with about food and farming, they were genuinely, as outsiders, thinking that they had a long-term vision, and this was a vision that they thought they could do better than big ag. And because big ag is so huge and oligopolistic, if that's a word, that they, as fast-moving entrepreneurs, would outcompete them. So again, there are a lot of questions that I just really don't know, what the future will hold, but there are a lot of sparky people that are building new companies, and investors who are, putting forth a lot of their own money with the belief that they can be the ones that become the new unicorns and bring these new innovations and sustainability to the market.
Yeah, if I can bring in a little of my background, I'm a biologist and scientist, and through the federal government, I helped with the global information and science technology entrepreneur competitions, and brought in the panels to review the startups and judge their pitches, and connect them to potential investors. It's a very fascinating process, and the innovation is incredible. It's, as you mentioned, it's the practicality and the hard steps to grow the company, but it's also sometimes the ideas don't pan out, and science, testing has to happen. But I'll just add, I'm excited to hear about a lot of these. So it's really good news, and on many fronts. Well,
again, as I mentioned during my talk, I mean, a fair number of the people that I interviewed and other entrepreneurs, they're going to fall flat in their faces. I mean, that's what entrepreneurs, at least a fair number of them, do, because it is indeed hard. But I'm optimistic that there's a lot of money that's flowing into some very creative people that are thinking about innovative ways to bring nutrition and sustainability to us.
Thank you.
Crystal, it seems like you have your hand up. Sorry.
Yeah, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I emailed in this question, and I'm coming to you from my garden while I'm wrapping up for the day. So on the theory that everything old is new again, and that we're sometimes we reinterpret systems in order to come back around to an earlier idea that was good. I've just been wondering whether some of the concepts of mutual aid that have been more prevalent during the pandemic for food insecurity support, like community fridges and like grocery pairings that my local mutual aid group has done, like if there are innovations along those lines that you're aware of, or that if you, I don't know, just like, I guess I'm just struggling with wanting to participate in systems that are less capitalist and more oriented toward mutual aid. And I also want there to be more innovation in this area. And so I was just wondering if you had thoughts or information on that.
Sorry.
To be honest, and I don't mean this, I had a hard time hearing your question, so I'm not sure that I've got a brilliant response. It wasn't. I apologize. It was just hard for me to hear. Erin, did you interpret that? And might you?
I had a hard time as well, but she did send it.
It does send that way. Great.
So I'm going to put it both in the chat. And I can read it aloud.
If you wouldn't mind the latter, that would be great.
So this book seems rooted in capitalism and entrepreneurship. So I don't know if you're interested in my question, but I'm wondering what Richard's perspective is on anti-capitalist and socialist efforts to improve food networks such as community fridges and mutual aid gardening. And then there's a part 2. I also wondered if Richard Munson had thoughts on the innovative work being done at Indigo Ag, which I understand to be working on seed coating to improve food plant resiliency and disease resistance. And then in parentheses, as a home gardener, I sure wish I had access to that seed coating.
On the latter part, I mean, as we heard before, Indigo is dabbling, and I don't mean that in any derogatory sense at all. It's very creative dabbling with a lot of data and also the design of seeds. And several other entrepreneurs are, I think, I mean, we've been, manipulating seeds for a long time. It's becoming increasingly a science that seems to be making substantial strides. On your first point, I admit that I focused this particular book mostly on entrepreneurs and on the investors that were supporting them, and I didn't mean to suggest things like our own community garden here where I live just outside of Chicago, or food pantries, or other non-capitalistic sides of things are not critically important. It's just there's only so much you can put in a book. Erin, were there other questions? Or I noticed that we're getting almost to your deadline. So whatever your call is, how you want to proceed.
Yeah, so let me see. I mean, I've got one question I like to end on, but let me check on some of the other questions. How can we reestablish interconnected local systems of food, health, economy, and the environment?
One more time, read that again.
Sorry. How can we reestablish interconnected local systems of food, health, economy, and the environment?
Well, I'll again come back and say I'm not sure. I mean, because that's a complicated one that we're all sort of trying to deal with. What is the appropriate mix? As I mentioned at the beginning, there's a typical diametrically opposed debates tend to focus on big ag or industrialized agriculture versus smaller scale regenerative ag, organic ag, or some of these new innovators. I'm not sure I'm going to solve that problem, and I think in the last couple of decades, probably big ag has been winning in some regard, in the sense that they have gotten bigger and more consolidated along the way. Will that continue? As I think this confluence of new technologies not just limited to agriculture, but I mean, overall, the ability of what sensors can do and what computers can do and what robots can do is extraordinary today across the entire economy. And I think they will, have an impact on agriculture, which I think will decentralize, control, simply because more people will have access to these technologies and think about ways to use them creatively.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'm going to end on just one question that I like to ask everyone. If you had a magic wand and you could change one thing about the food system, what would you change?
Oh, gracious. I said there was no magic bullet. That was my first point. No, I guess I'd come back and transparency, for lack of a better notion, just so that it is more clear, how food gets developed, what the situation is on farms, what the, where my food came from, who grew it, who's going to be the next, generation of farmers that are out and ranchers that are out there that are providing us that food. How we make things more transparent. And I think a lot of these innovators, largely, again, because of just the unbelievable advances in computation and sensing, will allow us to increase that transparency. But I guess, noting that I don't like your question because I didn't like a silver bullet, I'd have to go with transparency.
Yeah, it's a hard one, I know. Awesome. All right. Well, this has been fantastic. Thank you all for attending. And we'll probably have to do a part 2 to this. I say that with all of these, but we have so many more questions. All right.
Well, thanks everybody. Thanks, Aaron.
Have a great day. Bye.
Take care.